Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of What's Your Next? I'm Stacy Riska, your lifestyle matchmaker, here to help you do what you love what you do. Today, we're talking about the F word. Now, get your mind out of the gutter, guys. We're going to keep it clean today. The F word we're talking about is funding.
Welcome to What's Your Next? This is the go-to podcast for aspiring business owners who want to get to the next level, escape the rat race, and give their middle finger to the corporate 9-to-5. If you want financial freedom, work-life balance, and the business of your dreams, you're in the right place. Dave and Stacy Riska, husband-wife franchising duo, openly share their successes, failures, and lessons learned in franchising, business ownership, and working with your spouse.
Look, you get it. If you're going to invest in that perfect business of your dreams, you know that you need money. And most candidates that I talk to usually want to look at and explore some outside funding alternatives. So when you start doing that, you realize that there's good news and there's bad news. The good news is there's a lot of options out there. The bad news is there's a lot of options out there. It's kind of like alphabet soup. So to help us sort through that today, our guest is Ralph Nilsson. He's the Senior Director of Sales and Business Development with Guidant Financial. Ralph, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Stacy. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. All right, so let's break down this F word, funding, because I do find that it tends to be alphabet soup. We're not going to have time to go through all of the options today. But when people are looking at funding and looking at getting some outside funding, or financial resources to start the business of their dreams, what are some of the more common ones? And how could somebody understand which one might be the best option for them?
Yeah, great question. And it's one that we get at Guidant Financial all the time. And so where I kind of start the discussion is, do you want to have debt financing, or do you want to look at non-debt type of financing where you don't owe somebody a monthly payment or an interest rate? And there's two very clear paths, and sometimes it's a combination of the two. So oftentimes what we'll do is just immediately ask people questions. Let's find out where you're at. The last thing you want to do is go to a doctor and have them hear you got a cough and go, oh, that's COVID right there. It could be bronchitis, it could be pneumonia, it could be a million different things. So let's actually ask some questions and find out where people's assets are, what people's credit score is, what that they have available to them, to give them a more holistic idea of what's available. And very often people will say, well, listen, I want to talk SBA lending. And that's a very, very common strategy that's utilized. It's interesting because in the United States, the Small Business Administration was set up to help small business owners to be able to get themselves a loan. And the wonderful part about the SBA is that it's there. The frustrating part about SBA is that it's a government program. The government's full of lawyers. Lawyers love paperwork. And so it is a paperwork intense program that can move at the speed of a snail. But it does eventually, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and there is lending options available. We work with a lot of banks to help people with getting those SBA loans. Now, if somebody says, hey, listen, I don't really want to have a debt payment every single month. I really want to be able to self-finance it, but I don't have the cash on hand, because not everybody has a couple $100,000 sitting in a bank account. If you do, congratulations, you're one of the very few that do, and hey, that's wonderful. But we have a program called a Rollover for Business Startup. And the acronym for it is ROBS, R-O-B-S. Now, before you say anything, this is not my acronym. This is an acronym that came from the US government, which just goes to show that the IRS has about as good of a marketing department as a public relations department. So it's an awful acronym, ROBS, but it stands for Rollover for Business Startup. But for such a horrible acronym, it's an amazingly powerful strategy that allows you to take money that you have been saving and investing in other people's companies via the stock market and invest it in your own company. And so you're able to take retirement funds pre-tax and invest up to 100% of them in a company that you own, that you run, and you're able to realize the benefit of the growth of that company in your own retirement funds without having a monthly payment. And so we find that to be an incredibly powerful and extremely popular funding solution. And that works hand in hand with SBA loans. And oftentimes people will talk to us about a term loan or a portfolio loan. There is a myriad of options out there that really depends on what's your goal. What are you hoping to accomplish? Some people want to own one franchise. Some people are starting with one and they have the intention to own 3, 4, 5. Some people start out owning 3 to 5 territories of a franchise. There's so many different variations, and really, it's really important to understand what the goal is so that we can tailor a financial strategy to your goal. So that was a long monologue, and I apologize, but there's a lot there.
There is a lot there, and it is like alphabet soup. And
Yeah.
I love the approach that you're taking, because you're not just saying, oh, book a call with me and we're just going to get you some lending. You're saying we are a consultative approach. We want to know where you are now, where you want to be. We're going to present some options that you can consider, learn about them, evaluate them, determine what's best. And that's exactly what you did with one of my candidates who actually worked with you guys, who ended up doing a ROBS and now has their dream business of an auto tint franchise. And they had never heard of such a program. They had no idea you could take money from your 401k. But I'm curious to know, and as I'm sure my audience is, they're probably thinking, oh, 401k, if I take money out, am I going to incur penalties and taxes and fees? Like, how does that work? Can you share more of that with us?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, that's a very common misconception and held actually by many financial advisors and CPAs that people will go to and say, well, how do I do this? Well, you can't pull money out of a 401k. You can't use it to invest in a business, because in the normal way of doing things, if you withdraw money before the age of 59 and a half, you're subject to a 10% early withdrawal penalty on any pre-tax retirement funds. They're also known as qualified funds. Now, on top of that, you're going to pay normal income taxes on the amount you withdraw. And that's going to be added to the income you've already taken for that year. So there can be some really hefty penalties and taxes that are associated with doing this wrong. And that's why you want to work with a company that knows what they're doing. We have done this over 30,000 times in the last 20 years. So we know what we're doing, a lot of experience. But the key is that this strategy, the ROBS strategy, operates under the same principles as investing in the stock market. So if you think about your retirement, if you wanted to invest your retirement, your employer usually gives you a litany of funds that you can choose from. And you say, okay, I want this mutual fund or that mutual fund, and I invest in that mutual fund. Now, the nice part is you're able to watch on the ticker every day as that mutual fund goes up and down in value. And depending on how much of a roller coaster person you are, have fun watching it. But most of us kind of stick it in there, close our eyes, and kind of peek every once in a while. And are hopefully pleasantly excited when it goes up. But we don't make any money until we sell that mutual fund in our retirement accounts. The same principle applies. The difference with a ROBS is, instead of investing in somebody else's company through a mutual fund, I'm actually buying stock in my company. So my retirement is investing in stock in my company, and that stock is put into the retirement account. But just like in the stock market, when we invest in, say, an Apple computer, our funds are literally going to Apple Computer for them to invest in their company and build it. And that's what we want you to do, is we want you to take your retirement funds. We want you to invest them in your company, use those funds to grow your business, pay a franchise fee, secure a location, get inventory, have working capital, whatever you need to do. Those funds can be used for any legitimate business purpose out there. Now, if you want to go buy a Ferrari as your company car, that's probably not a good idea, okay? But you can use it to help pay a salary if you so choose. You can utilize that to say, I need inventory. And you know what's really nice? Sometimes the banks don't always approve you for enough working capital, and sometimes it takes a little bit longer than you think to get started. And so what a ROBS allows you to do is be able to hold and have that cash on hand so that should you need a little bit longer of a runway, you have that money available. And Stacey, let's be real. I've never known anybody to go out of business for being overcapitalized. So
Right.
it's an incredibly powerful strategy. And when done properly, you pay no early withdrawal fees, you pay no taxes. And like I said, you can use up to 100%. You don't have to use all of it, but you can use up to 100% of those funds to invest in your business. So
Amazing.
wonderful, wonderful strategy.
Such a fluid, flexible option. I like the idea that you're using your own money to invest in your own business. That gives you freedom, flexibility, and options that maybe if you're tied in with your local bank or an SBA loan, like you said, you're stuck in these monthly payments and it's not so flexible for you. So
Yeah.
very nice option. And a lot of the candidates I work with, they've been saving all their lives. They have a nice chunk of money put away, and they never thought that they could use this to invest into a business. So I appreciate you sharing more about it. I'm curious to know, a lot of franchises have different investment ranges. Most of the ones that I tend to work with are about, 150 all in. But some of them, like the candidate I just talked about in the auto space, his was
Yeah.
350 to 500 because you're talking about brick and mortar, lots of equipment. If you're talking about a ROBS or really any of these funding options, is the investment level for any of them more important than another as you're looking at funding options?
It's a great question because not everybody has $350,000 to $500,000 in a retirement account that they can just pull from.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what a lot of people look at is, okay, do I have enough cash? Can I combine my cash with some of the retirement funds to come up with the necessary funding? But many people need to go the route of, I need to get a loan to be able to supplement this. And this is actually really powerful when you're looking to open up 2 or 3 locations over a period of 2, 3, 4 years. Because when you're going for an SBA loan, the bank is going to look at everything. The banks are really, really good at not losing money. Okay. So they're going to look at any and all information that's available to them. And so if you're paying cash or you're doing a ROBS for your very first location, then they're going to see and wait and see until you have a tax return, profit and loss statements before they're going to grant you a loan on the second location. But if you start with an SBA loan and say, okay, I need an SBA loan, I don't have business history, they're going to look at you as a consumer in many ways and say, okay, well, what's your consumer credit look like? There's no business to wait and get tax returns from, and they can then give you the loan that you need. And so SBA loans, you go to the government website, they say it's a minimum of 10% down for an SBA loan. Now, I'm going to let you know a little secret. That's the minimum. Most banks do not go with the minimum. They have the ability to go as high as they want for a down payment. Most banks at this point are between 20 and 30% down. And they're going to want some post-lending liquidity, which means you've got to have cash in the bank after the loan has been paid out. So they want to make sure that you've got enough runway so that you're not, hurting for cash. So many people will do a ROBS to come up with the initial down payment. And I always recommend doing the minimum down payment possible. And if you think about that, the banks are interested in getting the loan. They make money on the interest. And so many people think, well, if I put 50% down, the bank's going to be more likely to lend to me. Not necessarily, because that's a smaller loan amount. They actually want the larger loan amount. So if you put the minimum required and you get the larger loan amount, there's no prepayment penalty for paying it off early. But what you're doing is, again, it's guarding your cash and allowing you the flexibility in the future. You may pay a tiny bit more in interest, but man, that security of having that cash there is so worth it. So back to your original question of, I put 20% down for an SBA loan, I guard the rest of the money, I can get approval for the loan, it starts paying out, and now I want to do location number 2. Well, I've got the cash that I'm making from the first location, I've got money set aside in the ROBS. Now I'm not beholden to a bank to give me approval to open up that second location. I can go. And that order of operation is so important, which is why we spend so much time at Guidant Financial asking people, what are your goals? What are your hopes? What are you looking to do? What do you want to accomplish? So that we can not only recommend the right financing strategy, but also recommend it in the right order. And that's really the end of the game. We want to give you the ability to make the right decision for you with all of the information. Let's be real, everything's on the internet these days, right?
Well, I always say, don't believe everything you see out there, especially when it's related to franchises, because there is a lot of misinformation. So that's why I want you to talk to me. And if you're talking with funding, I want you to talk to Ralph.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And then, go and verify what we've said, because here's the thing. Everybody has an opinion, but there are certain facts that you can go and verify. And you know what? When you're working with a professional, they're going to steer you in the right direction and help you to get those facts, not the alternative ones, the real ones.
Well, thank you. I'm even learning new things today. It's just such a brilliant strategy because candidates will come in, they'll see an amazing opportunity with a franchise, and they come in with an empire builder mentality. They want more than one, but they're thinking, oh my God, I don't have the cash right now to do it. So whether it's a ROBS or combining that with the SBA, what you shared about why you may not want to do exclusively SBA is just right on. And so the idea that working with someone like you and kind of customizing the best plan, and yes, if you want Empire Builder, you want 5 territories, you can do that and roll that into a program that you guys are structuring for them with the funding, so they're not like paying all this interest up front and they don't really have anything to show for it. So love that.
I appreciate that, Stacey, but don't discount the value that you bring to the table in helping the client and the funding company to work together and really communicating the key pieces of this opportunity so that we're working together. Because that is so important to have someone who understands franchising and understands what the business opportunity is. You bring that to the table. We're going to help bring the funding options together. And, it truly is a wonderful partnership to be able to help people launch themselves into the world of small business ownership. So I just appreciate that partnership.
To me, it really is all about the education, which is why I do this podcast, to share with the audience so they can learn and explore their options. So let's talk about some of the mistakes that we'll make, because candidates will come to me with, like you said, they go out on the internet and they learn or they see or they hear these things, maybe from friends and family, maybe from Googling. You've been, as you said, in this business for 30 years. So what have you found or seen that are the biggest mistakes that aspiring business owners make when they are looking at outside funding?
Yeah, the biggest thing is not engaging early enough in the process. So often, the SBA loans take time, especially if you've got to find a location and get a build out, and they don't work like a consumer credit or a consumer loan. Because I go to a bank for a consumer loan. I walk in, I say, hey, I've got a 790 credit score. How much do I qualify for? And they go, oh, yeah, sure, here. And they give me a number. Business financing works very differently, right? And so when I go in, I say, hey, I've got a 790 credit score. They go, great. Tell me about your assets. Tell me about your liquidity. Tell me about your income. Tell me about the business that you're wanting to purchase. Tell me about this. And the amount of paperwork I have to fill out is quite a bit. And I don't actually get a real approval for oftentimes weeks on the SBA loan. I can get a pre-approval, or I can get a we're interested or a letter of intent. Those are all great things, but I'm not going to get a true approval for a little while. So engaging early and being able to understand what your options are really, really, really helpful. I've seen people that come to us and say, hey, listen, I've got this amount of assets, but I want to buy a franchise that I'm in absolute love with that's way out of my price range. That's so hard. You don't want to have those conversations, but I believe a quick no is better than a drawn out forever yes too. Unfortunately, there's no clear path to owning this franchise. It's out of the price range. And I think, Stacey, you've probably seen this as well, is a lot of people confuse the more expensive the franchise, the more money I can make. And that's just the greatest falsehood there is.
True.
Because another great one I hear is, what's the best franchise out there? And I always
I've
smile and
never
laugh.
heard that question.
Really? I've heard that and I always laugh because I've seen people be successful in so many different franchises. It's all about finding the right fit for what they're looking to do, what they can afford to do, what their passion is. I mean, I'm preaching to the choir here, but getting that funding partner involved early in the process really provides direction. It puts kind of those guardrails on the exploratory process and allows them to know, okay, as long as I stay within this price range, I can really dig in and find the right business for me. Another one I always love is when people bring in their own attorney or CPA that have no idea at all, or investment advisor about business financing. Early in my career, I was a financial advisor. I had a Series 7, I had a Series 65, I even had a Series 22, and never in any one of those books did anybody tell me about a ROBS. It is a perfectly legal strategy. I just couldn't make my employer as a financial advisor any money by doing it. So I teach about it.
Wow.
And so because it's not in the test that many financial advisors take, they just don't think it's real.
Wow.
And it's always funny to me when you're able to explain it to them and it makes sense after a little bit. They're like, well, I've never been taught this. Right. Yeah, no, I know. Nor was I. So again, that's another one that I see. The big one is not being willing to be curious and to listen. You know what? Yes, it's your money. You've got to make the decision, but be curious and really learn about the different strategies. Don't rush to judgment, rush to conclusions. We're looking out for their best interest, and we're going to spend as much time as they need teaching and helping them to understand the pros and the cons. Because it's at the end of the day, funding is just a tool, and the right tool is dependent upon what it is you're looking to do. Hammers don't work really well when you're trying to get a screw into the wall. So, yeah.
Absolutely. It is a tool. And you're right that most people are not starting this conversation early enough in the process. They get so focused on that one question you just asked, what's the perfect franchise for me? And then spend so much time looking at 400 different concepts. And then they haven't even looked at the funding piece. So an analogy I kind of share with my candidates, it's like buying your dream home. If you're going to buy your dream home, then you want to know up front not only how many bedrooms and bathrooms and whether you want the city, the country, or the mountains, but also what you can afford. Because why do you want to look at something that may not be able to fit into the budget? And so I have a 9-step proprietary system that I use to match candidates. I call it the franchise roadmap system. And each of the letters in there stand for the steps that I guide them through to finding it. And the I, which is closer to the end of the road, is investment. But I share with my candidates that although that is towards the end of the road, if you're going to work with me, we're going to start that conversation earlier, because I want you to learn and explore what your options are. I want you to talk to Ralph, learn about what's out there, see what you're qualified for. The reason it's further down on the roadmap is because by that time, the franchise wants to know that you can get the funding, because if they're going to award you a license, they've just invested all this time and effort and money, energy talking to you, getting you out. If you get down that far in the road and you can't get the funding, then it all is for naught. So you're absolutely right. You've got to start that process early.
Absolutely. And what many people don't realize is that when you're using a combination of funding strategies, such as very commonly using a ROBS with an SBA loan, there's actual documents that have to be provided to the SBA, the bank giving you the SBA loan, and they have to be done absolutely correct, or it jeopardizes the guarantee that the SBA provides to that bank. So working with a company that understands the nuances of the process and can really help guide you through every step of the way is important. So I love your roadmap, the 9-step roadmap process, and it works. It absolutely works.
It does. And so you've given my audience a lot to think about, the different options that are out there, things to think about in planning to talk to you. What about, you mentioned like paperwork, or like, do they need to know their credit score? What kind of numbers or information are they going to have to start putting together when they're ready to start having a serious conversation with you?
Yeah, the very simple amount of information. Just for the initial conversation, it's really important to know, first off, what is kind of your roundabout credit score? Because if it's below 690, it's going to be more difficult to get a debt type of vehicle employed. Find out where your retirement accounts are at. If it's with a current employer, you may not be able to access those funds unless you leave your current employer. Many people have funds in their current employer that they rolled from a previous employer. Well, those are you're able to get a hold of, but it's important to know kind of what the amount is. Have an idea of what your cash liquidity is. Okay, what do I have cash on hand? Cash is king. Know the value of your home, know what you owe on it. Okay, that's really, really important stuff. And then also have a monthly budget. How much does it cost to pay your bills? Now, we're not talking about beer money or take your spouse out on the weekend money. We're talking how much does it cost to pay the mortgage, the insurance, the car payment, groceries, because we want to make sure that life continues as we try and understand where things are personally. So those are just the bare bones basics. Depending on the strategy, the further you get down the road, you may have to, provide tax returns, driver's licenses. But the first conversation is very much just high level. Let's get an idea of what we're working with. What are the components that we have? Think of it like baking a recipe. Let's just understand, what do we got in the cupboard?
Yeah. All right. Well, I know my candidates want to bake an amazing masterpiece called The
Yes.
Business of Their Dreams. And you've shared some really great tips and tools and strategies to think about when it comes to funding. How can people get in touch with you to learn more about what Guidant Financial does and or SBA, ROBS, this alphabet soup called funding?
I love that. The alphabet is super funding. Very simply, go to our website, www.guidantfinancial.com. If you want to give us a phone call, the phone number is 425-289-3200. So you can give us a call. We have teams there ready to assist you in any way we can. And then Stacy, what I'd like to do for your listeners is I'd like to include a free ebook that we've written, because ROBS is such kind of a, not many people know about it. So we're going to provide an ebook on their guide to the ROBS funding strategy. So we'll provide that to you so that everyone who wants one can get a copy of that book.
Awesome. Thank you, Ralph, for your generosity. We'll include that in the show notes below so you can access that. Well,
Perfect.
Ralph, thank you for being here with us today. You've really simplified the funding process, explained why it's so important, how it ties into the process of looking for that perfect business match. The closing question I have for you is, today's session is called What's Your Next? So, Ralph, what is your next? Good question.
It's a great question. Probably a volleyball game tonight with my daughter is going to be next on the plate. No, after this, I've actually got a call with a potential franchisee. Looking forward to being able to help them. They're looking at possibly purchasing 3 territories and are going to need about $400,000 to do it. So back to work and looking forward to it. But Stacey, so appreciate you giving me the time to be able to speak with you and just appreciate the partnership that we enjoy.
Well, thank you, Ralph. Thank you for being part of my community and sharing your expertise and brilliance on such an important topic. You've simplified it, made it easy to understand, and gave our everyone actionable tips. So thank you everybody for being here with us today on What's Your Next. We'll see you next time. Make it a great day. Bye-bye.